I think that sometimes existentialism gets caricatured as, oh, well, you don't have meaning, create your own meaning. And it's like, oh, wow, I would have never thought of that.
Yeah,
but it's like, okay, yeah, you know, if you boil it down, you know, I think I'm a firm believer in the idea that if you boil down things to, you know, 3 words, you can make almost anything sound really stupid.
That's true. That is probably true. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I mean, you can describe almost anything in a way that makes it sound weird.
Yeah.
Like eating a meal, or like, you know, meeting up with your friends or driving a car or whatever. You can describe it in terms that make it sound a little bit strange.
And put like that, it has that it has that the same sort of vibe of that video that went viral a few years ago. That woman going, well, if you're homeless, just like buy a house.
So
I understand why people kind of scoff at it. And I think
to what extent is existentialism or absurdism, I know people treat them very differently, they've got a lot in common. To what extent are these copes? I mean, when somebody says, you know, create your own meaning because you haven't got any meaning, it's a bit like, you know, Nietzsche comes along and says, God is dead, you know, no one believes in God anymore. And we say, oh, you know, just create your own God, which some people kind of do say, but it would seem like really crude to suggest, I know you don't believe in God, but just like I just create my own God. You know? I think to what extent is this sort of what's going on with existentialism or absurdism, and to what extent is that just motivated by a desire to escape it?
I mean, I think that arguably Camus' idea of philosophical suicide maps quite neatly onto kind of cope. This because, you know, he's conceiving it as a retreat into something. I think that's kind of often. If I again, you know, I'm not online very much, so but I see cope emerge as a kind of linguistic phenomenon, and it oftentimes, like, when I see people use it it seems to have this like Nietzschean accusation of dishonesty. It's like, you're saying you don't believe that. You are saying that because you cannot face up to the truths about you and the world and how they coexist and interact. And so I think that I think that a lot of existential philosophers accuse one another of cope. Nietzsche would certainly accuse someone like Kierkegaard of cope.
Right.
You know, this idea of like, oh, well, you know, effectively go back to religion, work on your faith. I'm massively simplifying what Kierkegaard thought there, but, you know, this kind of religious-based solution, you know, Nietzsche's going, well, it's cope. You know, this is just a retreat, and Camus would say it's just philosophical suicide. And you know, and also there's the question that I think that both of us have discussed before, just kind of over coffee, which is, you know, choosing beliefs is kind of a tricky thing. I mean, Kierkegaard again doesn't pretend that it's easy. You know, he says that true faith is like the faith of Abraham about to sacrifice Isaac, holding the simultaneous beliefs of he is going to continue living and I'm going to obey my God and stab him, and yet he will remain alive afterwards. And it's like this ability to hold loads of contradictions in your head. And a lot of us would say, yeah, okay, that's kind of cope. I mean, I certainly lean towards that. I mean, I don't know how I could do that. But this idea of faith is very kind of key to Kierkegaard's existential solutions. And I think that a lot of atheists would say that's cope, right? I mean, you know, what are you going to, you know, I don't believe in God. What are you going to do? Like, there's an open question of, well, where do I go from there? I actually tried this out one year for Lent every year. I know it's like a weird perversion of Lent, but I try out a philosophical outlook. So I went like last year, I went for the entirety of Lent without calling something good or bad. But I just thought, okay, I'm not going to do like baseline evaluations. I'm going to do descriptive evaluations. Instead of calling something good, if my, you know, friend did something nice, I'd say, oh, that was really kind.
Let's see if it's reducible.
And it was really hard. And, you know, I'm sure that, you know, the open question argument would crop up if I was there long enough, but you know, it worked a little bit. And a couple of years ago, I did this kind of, okay, I've got 40 days. This is in 2021, so it was lockdown, or lockdown-ish. I was like, okay, I've got 40 days. My final exams are coming up, so this is a good time to have a side project. I'm going to see if I can believe in God at the end of these 40 days. And I don't think I fully got there, but it was terrifying in a certain sense, because I sort of, because I remember, you know, like any kind of young atheist encountering the sort of pragmatic arguments to believe in God that someone like, you know, Pascal famously put forward, and also, you know, seems to have kind of had a resurgence in Jordan Peterson. I think that I don't know an awful lot about his work as a whole, but I sometimes am semi-familiar with his ideas about God. And so I thought, well, okay, but the fact that I can't choose in the moment, like I can't just will a belief out of nowhere, doesn't necessarily mean that I can't choose to believe. I might just have to affect my behaviors until the belief emerges. So I spent a lot of time on live stream church services. I read a lot of Christian literature. I didn't read any atheist literature. So I kind of just constructed my environment in such a way. I would call pretty much only my friends who were Christians. And by the end of the 40 days, I was like, if I continued this for 6 months, I'm sure that I would believe at the end of it.
Really?
Well, I suppose it makes sense, right? Because
that's true of most things.
Yeah, exactly.
I
we don't form our beliefs, entirely rationally. But
that's what Pascal was recommending. He didn't recommend just like say you're a Christian, because people parody it. You get to the pearly gates and God's like, really, you expect me to buy that?
Yes.
He's like, no, like steep yourself in the literature, because you've got nothing to lose by doing so, except something like, truth if you're wrong, but then who cares if God doesn't exist if you're wrong? To watch the full conversation, click the link on your screen. If you want to support the channel, subscribe to my Substack at alexoconnor.com. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.